Hello everyone, Rich Hagon, Zac Hill here, going inside the draft viewer. Yesterday at 0-0, remember draft was first this time, 8 players sat down at a killer pod. And Zac, we're going to take a look at the first picks for all our 8 players. So let's get to the big board. Let's see who's up first. It's Andreas Nordahl of Norway. Zac, tell us what we're looking at here.
All right, so you look at a pack like this, there's several different things you have to think about. The first is if you're willing to commit to a guild or not. The second is how good the cards are. I look at a pack like this, I see a gate, okay, you don't want to first pick it, but you can fix your mana. I'm going through, 1000 Lashes is the card that stands out the most right here. Premier removal spell, also a card that can clock, it can win a game by itself. Now I passed right over Molten Primordial. A lot of other formats, it's a 6/4 with haste, you steal their best guy, you attack him, basically wins the game on the spot. But 7 mana, a lot of mana in a format as fast as Gatecrash. Looking through the rest of the pack, again, you've also got Urbis Protector. Kind of the same variant of a card that just very expensive but very powerful. You just don't have a lot of time in this environment.
Okay, so are you more or less, when you sit down to draft, you're seeing 6, you're seeing 7, and you're saying no thank you, I just can't get there? Or is that something that you'd consider once you're much further along in the draft and you think, I've got room for 1 or 2 of these big guys?
I think it's a lot more the latter. I think it's not a format where you can't play a card like that, but it's a card where you have to work to play a card like that, and a card you need to build your deck around. So you can definitely first pick a card like that if you're willing to sort of do the work of getting there. But in this case, in this pack, there's a lot better cards than that.
Okay, now what Nordahl actually picks is this 1000 Lashes. And what I want to ask you, Zac, it is a commitment in white and black. Obviously, he could end up Boros, white-red. He could go elsewhere with the black spells. Potentially could end up Dimir. How splashable is 1000 Lashes either way? And is this a card that you would be willing to give up if the draft takes you in a different direction?
Well, first of all, I think you do have to be willing to give up your first pick. I think a lot of mistakes players make is just say, okay, my first pick's really good, I've got to play it at all costs. Can't really do that. That said, 1000 Lashes is an eminently splashable card. It's good at every phase of the game. It's not like, oh, you have to cast it on turn 4 for it to be good. So I've played it in plenty of Dimir decks. I played it in plenty of Boros decks. You're not excited to splash in this format, again, because it's fast. But, you're also excited to have a very powerful card like 1000 Lashes in your deck. So I do think you can splash it.
Okay, so that's Andreas Nordahl of Norway. Let's move around. To his left, passing, therefore, is Don van Ravensvaart of the Netherlands. Now, we said in our preview, good luck, my friend, in your first Pro Tour, PTQ Melbourne winner. Probably not going to do that well. That turned out not to be true at all. He did fantastically. Zac, talk us through the first set of cards he saw in his entire Pro Tour career.
For sure. So the first card that stands out to me is actually Agoraphobia. It's not really sort of a traditionally powerful card, -5, -0. It's like an okay removal spell.
Sure.
But in this set, your blue decks just really need to get to the long game. In addition, if you're in Dimir, you can pick up some extort cards in mono black. Being able to just bounce Agoraphobia and cast it to extort, really, really powerful ability, especially as the game goes longer and longer. Angelic Edict, great removal spell, a little expensive but kills anything dead. Killing Glare, another really high quality removal spell. Metropolis Sprite, not really excited about picking it this early, but it's kind of a quality card. Pit Fight, a card that you want in a lot of your Simic decks and all of your Gruul decks. This is really a good pack. You've got Drakewing Crassus, hard-hitting aggressive card, but it's a bit of a commitment. And then finally over here, you've got Rubble Hulk, who, for 3 mana can just deal an additional 8 damage out of nowhere.
Wait. What do you mean, finally? You haven't even talked about Killing Glare and Devour Flesh. You've got these 2 premium mono black removal spells, and you're kind of just going straight past that. That's how good this pack is. It's just really, you could almost pick, not quite blind from the pack. I guess you could end up with a Forced Adaptation, which is arguably the worst card in this pack, but it's a crazy good pack.
If I forgot about Killing Glare, I made a mistake.
Okay.
Killing Glare, definitely excellent card in this pack. The reason I skipped over Devour Flesh was just because I think this spell a lot more proactive, and actually the life matters a lot in a format like this.
Sure, absolutely, because they gain life equal to the creature's toughness on Devour Flesh.
Exactly.
So maybe you don't want to give them back that 4, 5, maybe even 6 life. That can be a big deal. All right, so he ends up with Rubble Hulk. Do you like the pick?
I think by picking Rubble Hulk, you're making a clear statement. You're saying, I like Gruul, you want to get the ramp deck, you're saying, okay, I'm gonna go top heavy a little bit. I don't think it's the card I would have picked because it's a lot more of a color commitment and I'm not sure I can get there, but I respect the pick. And it's definitely a card that people are not gonna be playing around. It can really kind of end games by itself.
One other question on this pick. Rubble Hulk is rare.
Right.
Is there an element to which when you see on the left, and we'll see who gets this pack next, when you look at a pack and you see the rare is missing, it can literally be anything.
Exactly.
Is there an element that sometimes you value picking a common or an uncommon, leaving a rare in the pack, specifically to say to the player on your left, hey, you know what? I have picked an uncommon that I value higher than this rare Rubble Hulk. Have you worked out what I might have picked?
For sure. There's definitely a lot of value to that. A tricky thing about this set is just that there could be a lot. There's a lot of uncommons I think that you could consider picking over Rubble Hulk.
Okay.
So and the way that Ravnica works, you have a lot of cycles. So it's like in some sets it's like, okay, mind control, overrun, fireball. In this set it could be any guild mage.
Any guild mage.
So it's less direct of a signal than you get otherwise.
Now, as it turned out, Ron van Ravensvaart of the Netherlands, he won the whole draft. He went 3-0. He ran the table. Let's move on to seat number 3, and let's see who we've got next. So there goes Ravensvaart. Away we go, and we come to Ben S, who'll be back next round to tell us about his day 2 draft. Looks pretty good from here. So again, what do we got, Zach? What are we looking at?
Well, you take a look at this pack, and it's really not that exciting of a pack. You've got a kind of medium rare in Immortal Servitude. You're not really getting too excited about that. Miming Slime is like kind of okay, but not really good. Ivy Lane Denizen, again, a card you're going to always play, but not super exciting. The card that stands out to me is Bane Alley Broker.
Yep.
Draws you a lot of cards. It can actually block a 2/2 as an 0/3, but a lot of people really don't like Dimir. That's another reason that Shadow Slice, very powerful card, but you don't see it going highly because it's Dimir. And finally you have Smite, which is just kind of a solid but unexciting removal spell that, it's kind of a role player. It does exactly what it says it does.
One question, I wonder whether you might consider, if you like red a lot, taking the Warmind Infantry, partly because it then literally empties the pack of red.
For sure.
At which point, next player round has to think that you took a common, there are no red cards left in the pack. It's a pretty good bet that there is a red common sitting to your right at that point.
No, that's a really good point. And Warmind Infantry is an extremely solid card. I think it's a very defensible first pick. I guess the reason I don't like it as much is I feel like it's kind of low upside. Like if you want to cut off a color, I think you just go with the Broker right here because it's like the only sort of Dimir card that like is actually a card that you'd be really excited about playing again besides Shadow Slice. But then without the Broker in the pack, I think you have cards that are sort of clearly better picks than it. But yeah, I mean, certainly that's something you can think about is whether you want to communicate your color choice.
All right, so Ben takes Smite, ends up 2-1. Let's move to seat 4. So we're following round and we get to our second Dutchman, Lennart Lindemann. He's played on one Pro Tour before, way back in the day, 2002. 3 lifetime pro points coming into this event. Again, we thought Sacrificial Lamb, not a bit of it. He went 2-0 and then lost out in a pretty tight match with Don van Ravensvaart, his countryman, to finish off the pod at 2-1 for him, 3-0 for Don. So here's what Lennart Lindemann looks at. He's got a Consuming Aberration in the rare slot, Corpse Blockade, Crackling Perimeter, an Ember Beast, wants Friends, Foundry Street Denizen, nice Boros card, Sky Knight Legionnaire, Simic Flux Mage, an interesting card, your little Metropolis Sprite, good removal again, Killing Glare, got a Gate, Slate Street Ruffian, another of those Warmind Infantries, and a Wildwood Rebirth. Again, not a particularly strong pack, Zach.
Well, I mean, yeah, you see Killing Glare here. I think, again, that's a card you really want, but you're absolutely right. It's not a terribly deep pack. You've got the infantry again, but I think this is a case where you look in the top left, you see a Consuming Aberration. You may not get excited about Bane Alley Broker if you're Ben Stark. This card, even better than that. It is a Dimir card, but it's very hard to lose the game if you untap with this.
And of course, a lot of you know this at home because Consuming Aberration was in the Guild pack at the pre-release. So a lot of you will have played with and against Consuming Aberration and just seen how quickly it gets out of hand.
Exactly, and like we have all these arguments about signaling and staying open or whatever. Sometimes a card is just so good that you have to take it. I think that's what happened in this pack.
Yeah, and not only does he do that, It happens to be blue and black. And what that does for him is it cements him towards Demir, the guild that, as we found out, is kind of underdrafted, undervalued, underappreciated, and therefore over in terms of the opportunity. So, in a sense, forced that way.
Right.
But good news for him, and he started out 2-1, partly off the back of that.
Right.
So we're halfway round the table. So on we go round the back side of the table, and we get to Reed Duke. Zach, what's he looking at?
So, I mean, Reed, again, just sort of starting out with the top. Assault Griffin, always fine, not a card you want to be taking first. You've got Death Cult Rogue and Hands of Binding. I love Hands of Binding in my blue decks. Huge tempo play, acts like a removal spell. Really, really, really good card. Homing Lightning, though, just straight up kill spell, monocolored, kills basically anything. You see another 1,000 Lashes. Good kill spell, really high quality pack. You'd be really excited to see any of this, but then obviously the rare Stolen Identity. Clone is great and limited. 2 clones are even better, and any number of clones, hard to really argue with.
Some people won't know what clone is. Put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy, clone, that's the original card that did that, copy of target artifact or creature. So you could even copy something like a Blind Obedience, couldn't you?
Yeah,
Something,
sure.
Is that right?
Well,
Is that
not
right?
a Blind
Blind
Obedience,
Obedience.
but a
But
key rune or
armored
anything
transport
like
or a
that.
Q, something like that.
Yeah.
So there's your Stolen Identity. That is what he picks. One question with your R&D hat
Yeah.
on. We've seen a couple of Killing Glares go by.
Yeah, sure.
Single black and X.
Right.
Removal spell. Here's Homing Lightning, 2 and 2 red.
Right.
As opposed to, let's say, 3 and a red.
Of course.
Explain the difference and why you do that sometimes with the double red.
A lot of the time, you just want to make sure that not all your removal spells are cards that can be splashed into any deck. For something like Homing Lightning, where it's like, it's an instant, it kills basically anything. You see this Grizzly Spectacle in the common slot. Something that's just...
Double black.
Double black, exactly. Something that's that versatile and that powerful. You really want to make people invest in a color to get access to that level of power. And not just say, okay, I'm playing green-blue, I'll play 2 mountains and a Homing Lightning.
And those 2 mountains are what we mean by a splash. 9
Right.
swamps, 7 islands. I'll just slot in my splash, my 2 mountains, and that
Exactly.
lets you play Homing Lightning. No, it doesn't, because you've got the double red. All right, thanks for that, Zach. And I know most of you know that, but we're always looking to new people as well. Let's move on. That was Reed Duke, and now Patrick Chapin, the innovator. He has an adaptive Snapjaw, little bomber core, the sort of poor man's battalion guy.
Yeah.
Further along though, super powerful battalion, frontline medic. As we come along the middle row, another Metropolis Sprite, a double red, we just talked about that in the cost, for massive raid. Last thoughts to draw a card. Primal Visitation, Righteous Charge can be a game winner late on, particularly for Boros, and Wojciech Halberdiers a real sort of meat and potatoes of the quick Boros deck. So what do you like here? Is it clear cut?
I don't know how clear-cut it is. I mean, like, Righteous Charge has huge upside, but you don't want to take it this early. Massive Raid is a card that looks a lot better than I think it plays out in reality.
Sure.
It's a removal spell, but the double red is challenging, and you have to have a lot of creatures in play first. I think really the only picks that get me excited here are Wojciech Halberdiers and Frontline Medic.
Right.
And I think Frontline Medic is just better in, it's a better card, it keeps you more open, and it's even better, I think, in the Boros deck than Wojciech Halberdiers is. So I think Frontline Medic is just, it's a really solid pick. It's not like a bomb or anything, but it's quite good.
I rate it a little higher than Zach because Boros so often wants to attack and give battalion, and often you're suiciding 1 or 2 guys. Maybe you get to attack with 4, you know that 2 are going to die. When Frontline Medic is in your battalion team, they're all indestructible, they all come back again for another set of battalion triggers, and that's often enough to win the game. I actually do think of that, I don't call it a bomb, because certainly when you draw it late, it's just
Right.
kind of a 3/3
Still a 3/3, but
around.
yeah.
But if it's in your opening hand and you are Boros and you are aggressive, it can win plenty of games. Patrick Chapin took Frontline Medic. Not sure whether it won him plenty of games, but it didn't win him plenty of matches. Chapin began 0-3. Someone at the table had to turn out to be beginning with a Frontline Medic. Let's move on. Let's see who we've got next. It's Gardenis Vidigiris. Now this, of course, this was just the start of a whole deck sequence that you can watch back from yesterday's coverage. Go came in and talked us all the way through. And he wasn't terribly happy, Zach. So I'm going to spoil part of what he said, which was, I took Fathom Mage, it didn't really do much for me. So I want you to ignore the Fathom Mage and try and take us in a different direction that can change the opening of Go's draft. Because in fact,
sure.
he takes another Fathom Mage pick 2 as a result. So go a different direction for us.
Go a different direction.
I didn't
like
do that on purpose.
I think he's
really
trying
didn't.
to sneak one in on
I
me, Rich.
wasn't. Go on.
Okay, so we're ignoring Fathom Mage. It's like fine. The 2 cards in this pack I really think are Mugging and Grizzly Spectacle.
Okay.
Removal is really good in this format. Removal is good in every format, but with Boros needing to have 3 creatures to really do its thing, and Gruul needing to have creatures to take advantage of Blood Rush, instant speed removal can just be extraordinarily powerful.
Right.
And the more removal you have, the more late game cards you can play, which other people don't want. So I think you go Mugging if you're looking to sort of keep your options open for a lower curve deck, sort of lower variance. It's less of a commitment because in theory you could splash it in like a rug deck that we've seen people play.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Grizzly Spectacle, not only because it just deals with anything, it can deal with bombs, but it makes a lot of the other black cards better, specifically Death's Approach.
Sure.
If you cast a Spectacle, all of a sudden your Death's Approaches basically kill,
Because Death's Approach is -X, where X is the number of creatures in their graveyard. Grizzly Spectacle helps fill it up.
Exactly, and you can get those cards late pretty often because people don't like Dimir. So I think I would take Grizzly Spectacle, hoping to go either Orzhov or Dimir and get a lot of late cards. And I'd take Mugging if I was just kind of being conservative.
Now, I hate to agree with Zac, but another plus point to the Grizzly Spectacle, I hope you've been watching, round about here in the pack, we keep seeing Killing Glares.
Yep.
Does anyone take them? They do not. So it turns out, if we go back a couple of packs from round the table,
Right.
there's a very good chance that when you open something like Grizzly Spectacle and take it, you then get Death's Approaches, Killing Glares, you get the Devour Flesh
Right.
that maybe isn't as good as some people would like. But
Still
it is
very good.
And it's quite possible, one of the interesting sort of draft pathways that we may get to see later today, and certainly in your Magic Online drafts, is starting mono black and just going black removal, black removal, black removal, black removal. Here's a white precinct 6 which will make my removal better. More black removal. And eventually then you read the draft, and somewhere in pack 2, you start working out, am I Dimir? Am I actually going to pick up some red and be in this strange sort of quasi Rakdos control deck kind of thing? And all of those are really valid options if you start with a Grizzly Spectacle. So that's an interesting one.
A deck Sam Black drafted when I was testing the Star City was just a deck with 5 Executioner swings. It just had like a couple Grizzly Spectacles, 5 Executioner swings, and it killed literally every card the opponent cast, and it just won with whatever. And the more hard removal you have, the more reliable a deck like that can be, and you can get Executioner swing very late.
Okay, so that was Godenis Vidigiris. He took Fathom Mage. We looked at a different path, but then that changes everything. And then we get Olivier Rouel, the French Hall of Famer. What are we looking at here, Zac?
All right, so we've got like a Balustrade Spy. You don't want to take it too early, but I'm pointing it out just to, again, it turns on Death's Approach and things like that. Death Cult Rogue, again, solid. You don't really want to pick it first. I like a Duskmantle Guildmage a lot, but it's a commitment to Dimir. You're seeing, there's a lot of quality cards, but not a lot of first picks in this pack until you get to Hellkite Tyrant.
Right.
Now, it's very expensive. You're not going to be gaining control of artifacts. You're not going to be winning the games. You have 20 artifacts.
Yeah, this thing has one line on it. It's flying and trample.
Right.
But that's a really good line.
Exactly, and these are really good numbers right in the bottom right-hand corner too. Nimbus Swimmer, I think, is kind of just a worse version of Hellkite Tyrant unless you really want to be in Simic. And then you're rounding stuff out with a Slaughterhorn, which is one of the premier Gruul cards, good in any green deck. I would probably go with either the Guildmage to force Dimir or Hellkite Tyrant because it's just so good. You may not get to 6, but when you do, it's going to win you the game.
And that's a phrase we haven't actually said very much during this round the table. We haven't seen many cards we've said, this wins games.
Right.
And you absolutely say that about a 6/5 Flying Trampler for 6.
Exactly.
Absolutely great. All right, so we got any more, or was that last one round? I've kind of lost track of, are we all the way back to
I believe
Lord
that's it.
I think that's our bunch. So, 8 first picks, 8 choices, 8 starts of storylines. When you start each draft, start your own storyline, because where you go, it affects everyone, downstream, upstream, most of all, it impacts your draft. So each pick, work out where you want to go. Zac Hill, Rich Hagon, and we're going to be back at the news desk in just a moment.